Yo, what up, everybody?
Good morning.
Good morning. There's
How
no
is
music,
everyone?
by the way. There it is.
There we go. See,
So I am obviously not David Villa. My name is Mike. You guys have seen me before. Typically not on this camera. I look so much worse in higher resolution. That's the funny part about
You look fantastic. I got you all smoothed up.
it. So Dave looked at me this morning because he's focused on closing out the month this month. Today's the last day of the month for us, and we were kind of going back and forth with 10 minutes to spare before we were supposed to go live. And Dave's like, "Mike, why don't you do it?" And I was like, "All right, well, sure, I'll give it a shot. And if it doesn't go well, we won't do it again." But welcome. It's Friday. We'll have some fun with this today. I am extremely nervous, as I always am, speaking in front of people.
Would it help if we joined you on screen?
That wouldn't really bug me.
Okay.
But sorry, Pierre just walked in the studio. I texted him about one time he was going to be here to see if he may want to join us, but it's a little bit late. So today, by the way, I don't know if you guys can, Ezra, if you can show Sam what to do to switch and have the Facebook and LinkedIn feeds on the front screen in front of me.
I got you.
We're going to be talking about excellence in everything. I did Make It Happen this past Tuesday at here at IPD. Make It Happen is a kind of company-wide meeting. Hold on. All right. No, this is the producer side of me coming out while I'm trying to host a podcast. Sam, close Safari and open Chrome. I never use Safari for anything ever.
To his
Command space bar, type in
there
Chrome.
that's the only one that's on the desktop. So
Yeah, because I'm a keyboard shortcut kind of person.
patience
The
is a
big boy
virtue
seat,
today.
love it, Mike Sherritt. Thanks, Eddie Brown. Because everything should be saved in there, Sam. But yeah. So anyway, today, Make It Happen it's kind of a company-wide meeting. We do at 12 o'clock every Tuesday. And it's just a short, 15-minute message. And I have to now extend my 15-minute message, which was already only 8 minutes, into a 30-minute podcast. So we're going to have some fun with this. But the title today is Excellence in Everything. Again, my producer's side, you guys can fade the music out at any point in time.
Oh, I did on the board's end, but I'll.
Okay, I got you. So excellence in everything. If you were to look at the Faith Gear drop that's coming very soon, Faith Gear was something that I never imagined myself ever really doing. Faith Gear was something that we needed somebody basically to kind of jump in and just start moving stuff and getting things moving because it was kind of slow. We all handle a lot of different things. And I'm actually a pretty decent project manager. So I jumped in and we kind of started getting things moving. And I challenged everybody in the marketing team, over a 4-day period. I want everybody to have 2 designs. And the first design that I actually put into submission was Excellence in Everything, which is actually going to be coming with the next drop. Stay tuned for that. We should have more information on that shortly. We're waiting on our printer to send us the quote back so that we can get everything ordered. But Excellence in Everything was the first one that I got, and I'll kind of break it down, but I'll kind of give you a little backstory. Excellence in Everything came from, if you've listened to this podcast at all, everybody knows I'm a drummer. I've been a drummer since I was 8th grade, so 12 years old. I started playing and I taught myself. For a lot of years I taught myself, but I pretty much grew up playing to a very eclectic taste of music. But pretty much I learned how to play by sitting in the back of the church and tapping along with whatever the band was playing to. And as I continued my career, as I continued playing, my own style kind of came out. And when I did Make It Happen the other day, I asked people this, who's ever seen me play live? I know Ezra has. I don't think Sam's ever seen me play live. And I know Dave has. But there's one thing that everybody will always say about, when I play. I had a reputation in the area when I was playing at another church that I was the drummer who broke things. That's the easiest way I could put it. I break sticks, I broke drum heads, I broke cymbals. I played very passionately. When I walked up on stage, my mindset was I'm going to give 110% while I'm up here because I don't want to walk off of this stage thinking that I didn't do everything I could to make sure that the people around me weren't able to get to a place where God was able to speak to them. So that was the mentality I took, and that kind of started to develop into an overall theme that I do for everything. If you ask anybody I work for here, I kind of have a reputation of, if somebody asks me to do something, they always know that it's going to get done. So excellence in everything is where this all spawned from. I'll break down the word excellence. Similar to Dave, I like definitions. So the word excellence is defined as the quality of being outstanding or extremely good. Now, the part about outstanding or extremely good is the part that I always kind of hone in on. Obviously, that's the main crux of the definition, but you can't do things for the sake of good enough. You have to be extremely good at it. I'm not saying you have to be the greatest at every single thing you do, but you should always be putting all of yourself into what you're doing. Anytime, and Ezra and Sam, you guys can jump in at any point in time if you guys want to talk.
Are you getting nervous?
No, I'm not getting nervous. I just want to
kidding,
make
I'm
sure I
just
say that.
No, I'm just kidding.
But Ezra knows this, and Ezra can attest to this. Anytime I've ever decided to take on something new, I throw 110% of myself into it.
Yeah.
If with Faith Gear, I jumped in head first, started laying everything out, pushing everybody, getting everything moving, and we had a drop put together in 2 weeks.
Yeah, it was definitely fast.
But it kind of goes into all facets. So the word excellence, isn't just good enough. It isn't just enough to get by. It's not barely passing. It's outstanding. Outstanding literally means exceptionally good. And I was actually going to have that as a separate definition of my notes, but it literally just means exceptionally good. So what does it mean when you start to do things with excellence? When I started working out, I talked about Faith Gear already. Basically, what spawned and started as something that I did only with drumming started to kind of creep into other areas of my life. For instance, my work ethic. When I started this year, most of you guys know that have been watching this or listening to this podcast know that, at the beginning of this year, David already started working out and dieting. I started dieting and working out, so I threw myself into it 110%. Most people, if they make that decision, are probably going to say, well, I'm going to go to the gym, a couple times a week to start. No, I went 5 times a week from day one. First thing in the morning, I woke up at 5:30 on the 4th of January and started going every single morning. I jumped in head first. So to make this more of a biblical thing, so I can kind of tie this again, and I feel like I'm rambling, so I'll bring this back to my notes.
It's all right, because I'm going to ramble on some stuff you talked about in a little bit. So
1 Corinthians 9:24 through 25. You've all been to the stadium and seen the athletes race. Everyone runs, but only one wins. Run to win. All good athletes train hard. They do it for a gold medal that tarnishes and fades. You're after the one that's gold is eternal. So what does that mean? I go back to verse 24, but I go to the New Living Translation because I like this one a little bit better. Do you not realize that in a race everyone runs, but only one person gets the prize? So run to win. The run to win part was literally what I honed in on when I was coming up with that first design for excellence in everything, which is what spawned this message. And it really was that metaphor of the race. All of us here at IPD, all of us that are listening to this podcast, all of us are doing something every day where in life we're all running against other people. It's not necessarily a competition, but all of us are running in a race. So it's a very simple question. Why wouldn't you, if you're going to run the race, if all of us are part of it, why wouldn't you try to win at least? Why wouldn't you run with the way that you would at least have a chance to win? Why would you power walk it instead of sprinting it? There's a couple different ways that can break down. For me, I'm going to try not to make it sound like I'm trying to talk down on anybody, so I'm going to always reference myself. For me, it's laziness. I have a really big struggle with, I know the right thing to do. I know what I should do, and sometimes I just really don't want to do it. I'd rather just sit back and maybe watch a few YouTube videos. But, it's literally biblical that, it says we're all running this race, so why wouldn't you run to win? Obviously, our race and the goal that we're going to eventually take, the medal that we're eventually going to get is when we get to heaven, which is eternal. So it, we're not after an earthly crown. We're after that eternal life in heaven. But why not run the race while you're here on earth to win? Why wouldn't you want to do that? I made the example, how many, if you think back, how many people here have, gone into a day, kind of a bleak outlook, and you kind of just made it by. You kind of just went through the motions to make sure you did enough to get through the day. And at the end of that day, when you think back on it, how did you actually feel at the end of it? For me, those days, I felt completely unorganized. I felt very inefficient. I felt very just unproductive. There's days that I've come in, though, and I've put myself in a position where I'm going to say everything I do, I'm going to make sure I do it 110% today, 110%. And typically, funnily enough, those are the days that I actually have the most mistakes, but I feel like I learned the most. And I also took the most away from that day because I felt it was my most productive day that I've had. When you wrap this back into, a professional life, how many people come in and, I made the reference to our sales team, when you're making calls all day long and you're just trying to make by to hit your numbers, how does that feel at the end of the day? Ez,
So,
I know your workload, obviously you work under me, but, how does it feel at the end of a day when you just are like, I'm just going to skate today. I'm just going to get by.
well, I mean, Mike can tell you too that one of my bigger hindrances is that, I want to do the best I can with the least amount of work. Just because, sometimes
you like to min-max.
Exactly. I like to min-max. I like to, do as little as possible to get the best product. And a lot of that is because, I rely a lot on talent, and I rely a lot on this idea that, especially in my position, that like I'm one of a very small select few people here that could produce the product that we produce. And so, in my eyes, sometimes that kind of is sort of like a blinder to me, to where it's like, oh, well, like I get to make the decision on how I do this because I'm the only one that can do it or will do it or whatever. And in reality, it's not true. There's plenty of people that could do what I do significantly better than I do. But one thing that I've, especially being, Mike and I transitioned into becoming him becoming my manager, just because we work really well together, and it was just something that it made sense at the time, and it still does, just because we work so closely together already. But one thing that I noticed was that, being with Mike, working with him and so much, and seeing how his work ethic is, and seeing his process for when he tries to do things max instead of min-max. But when he does try to do those things, it kind of helped me realize that I should always be trying to figure out how I can just make myself that much better. Now, whether that be I just, sit, if I have extra time and I'm just watching videos on Skillshare, to where, there's just certain things that I know that I lack skill in, but people don't recognize it, but only I recognize it because I'm the one doing it. But yeah, like it's those days that, even though I have gotten better at those things, but there's still those days where I just walk in and I don't feel like being here. I don't want to be here. I don't want to have to deal with the work that I have to deal with. I don't want to have to deal with, the problems that I know I'm going to walk into. And when I leave after that, it just doesn't feel like, I don't know, you just leave feeling the same way you came in. You go home and you don't want to do anything, and you just don't want to continue being productive, or you don't want to go have fun with your friends or whatever. You just want to sit and sulk, and it doesn't do anything positive for you. And it definitely is, it's not the way to go about things, is what I think you're looking for.
I mean, I understand what you're saying too. And I think you said something that kind of I want to hit on. And Dave hits on this a lot, talent. You said you're a talent. Nobody's denying talented for you or me or really anybody that works here. Nobody's saying we don't have the talent. But I learned a long time ago, especially hearing Dave say it, is that it's like talent doesn't matter. Talent won't cut it.
Yeah.
Something along those lines. And I don't remember the exact quote. And I always thought about that quote when I first started hearing it, because I used to do exactly what Ezra does. I was the one that was recording every single video here. So I heard all of David Villa's quotes, 12 times over, because I also had to go back and edit the videos. And I always thought about it, and I always wondered, why it was that way. So I'll make an example, and then I'll kind of tie this back into a biblical sense here in a second. We went up to North Carolina. It was myself, Villa, Cribs, and I believe Jason, who worked here at the time. This was years ago. We went to North Carolina for a conference, and we were going to be doing a live broadcast, and I was still very, very new to live streaming. I did not know anything aside from how to basically make it work, and that was how I learned how to make it work. And I remember sitting in that hotel room / meeting room until 3 a.m, trying to troubleshoot and fix an issue with the actual hotel's internet provider. And I think David and David were downstairs until about 1:30, and then they finally went to bed, and I was still up. And it was 3 o'clock, and I finally, I'm going back and forth. I'm on the phone with their internet provider, going back and forth, trying to figure out why I just can't seemingly connect to the internet. Ultimately, we get to a point where he says, look, you're going to have to talk to the on-site technician. They get there at 7 a.m. So I finally shut down. It was like 3:30. I went to bed. I woke up at 6, showered, got ready, and I was standing at the front desk when the technician walked in. And I remember Dave coming down for breakfast that morning at the conference, and he looked at me and he's like, you're already awake? I was like, yeah, I went to bed at 3:30. I was back up at 6. We got it fixed. It was something very, very simple on our side. I remember Dave telling me a few weeks later that made an impression on him, with how I am as far as my work ethic. And I'm not trying to be boastful in this podcast. I'm not trying to, talk down on anybody. I'd rather use myself as an example than anyone else, because I make fun of myself all the time. That was an example of that was an example of two things. Number one, that was an example of I can't let a problem go once it's in front of me. Anybody who's worked with me knows that if you put a problem in front of me, I will beat my head against the wall until I fix it.
Literally,
I will. The other part of that was part of me didn't want to give up, so I kept pushing to find the answer to it. And I was trying, in that example, was to do it with excellence. I wasn't going to just go, well, I hope things are going to be okay tomorrow. Well, I hope this is going to go well. Well, I hope that, we are going to be just fine when it comes to the live broadcast, because right now we're not. It was one of those, I want to make sure that I've done everything in my power to find a solution or find a resolution to this. And that's the second part of the phrase or the title today, which is in everything. When you take the word excellence, which means not excellently good, that would literally be ironic if that was the definition. Exceptionally good or outstanding. Then you take the second part of that and put it into in everything. In everything is a very overwhelming statement. In everything literally can come, if you really want to break it down on a very micro level, would be every single breath that you take should be done with excellence. Every step that you take should be done with excellence. Every single movement that you make should be done with excellence. By the definition of what the perfect footstep is, you should be doing it that way. It's very difficult to take that in. So it's, if you don't want to get caught up thinking on such a micro level of that, but think of it this way. Every interaction that I have today is going to be excellent. Every phone call that I make, every client that I talk to, every potential customer that I talk to is going to be done with excellence. For our call center, for every lead that they talk to is going to be done in excellence. And when you start thinking that way, it starts to just become habitual almost, where it's in your mind, where instead of thinking I have to make this excellent, you start making it excellent every single time. I've been using the phrase recently, in the past, probably since February, I'd rather aim for the stars and land on the moon. And when you break that down, what it really means is I would rather not aim for the moon and still be on Earth. I would rather aim for the stars, which is almost impossible to reach, and land on the moon, because landing on the moon is still an accomplishment. When you take this into your normal everyday life, excellence in everything, what does that mean? It can be as simple as being kind to people. It can be as simple as just showing kindness to somebody in public. It can be as simple as being positive to somebody that's being extremely negative towards you. It can be showing love to somebody. Let's just say you're cold calling and you're dealing with a ton of people. I mean, imagine you're the person that calls on the other end of the phone that's calling about your vehicle's extended warranty. Imagine that you're that person, and you probably get told 200 times a day many, many different things that I can't say on this podcast because this is a Christian-based podcast.
You should be. You should be told it.
But you get told
No,
that.
just kidding.
you know, and that's a very extreme situation. But you do it with excellence where you at least treat the person back with kindness. You know, that's one of the hardest things that I've come across is taking somebody, whether they're, you know, coming at you, they're slamming you, or they're just being rude, and being able to counteract that with kindness and love, or excellence for that matter. You know, when you think about excellence, you have to think about the example that Jesus left us, which is what we should be aiming to live for on a daily basis, which literally would be the word excellence. There's only one person that's ever been able to perfectly walk through every situation and do it excellently, which was Jesus. And that's our strive. That's what we should be striving for on a daily basis, except we will never be able to attain it because we are human and because we make mistakes. So how do we continue doing that? It starts with a mindset. It starts when you wake up every morning. It starts when you walk into your office, your house, your bedroom, your bathroom, wherever you want to make that decision. It starts at the beginning of your day, whatever time you wake up. It starts then that you have to decide that I'm going to do things with excellence today. It starts with me. It starts when I wake up in the morning. I have to say, all right, it's 5:30. I have to get up. I have to go get dressed. I have to go to the gym. I'm going to make sure that I work out my hardest while I'm at the gym, because I feel so much better after my workout's done. And when I get to work, everything I do is going to be done with excellence, because at the end of the day, I will know that even if I messed up, I did everything in my power to make sure everything was taken care of and done in a way that would be helpful. Very transparent moment I'll have, and then I'll let Sam and Ezra weigh in, because I feel like I'm done talking and I feel like I'm kind of rambling. Dave... We were doing an event coming up, and Dave looked at me as far as finding partners and sponsors for the event. And, you know, he told me about commissions and all that stuff, which I'm not a salesperson. I don't like sales. I don't have the personality type for it. I probably could be okay at sales if I ever actually did it. I just don't have the personality type for it. I prefer working with computers and all that. That's just where I live. And Dave said something to me, and I just told him, I'm like, I'm not really, I mean, like, don't get me wrong. Commissions are nice and extra money is always nice. I'm never going to say no to that, but I don't do things with the expectation of making more money. I do things because my self-pride won't let me do things under a certain level. Yeah. So if I'm taking something on, I want to do it and do it with all that's in me, so that I know that at least even if I fail, I put forth my best foot and I at least learn something from it.
Yeah. I want to touch on, that I think it can also, I think a lot of selfishness can come from what we're talking about, just because we think that because something isn't directly, you know, something that applies to them, or something that doesn't really benefit them in the long run. Like, for instance, there's plenty of things here that, you know, I do every day that wouldn't have any effect on me if I didn't ever do them. You know what I mean? Like, it wouldn't be something that, but at the same time, like, that mentality can be really, really, really negative, just because it's not about you at a certain point, and it gets that, you know, you think like, oh, this doesn't have anything to do with me, so why would I try that hard? And that was something. It's funny because Mike and I, we had a client of ours that we worked with, and some things fell through, and I had done a lot of work with them, and basically I worked really hard on all these different projects, and none of them came to fruition. Like, nothing ever happened with them. They just sat in a file on my computer for 8 months maybe. And
let's be clear, it was because of COVID, but
yeah, it was because of COVID. Yeah, it wasn't they just canceled or whatever, but it was just a matter of, I just had to sit through it. And so Mike comes to me and he says, you know, we got hired again, and we need to basically have a whole new thing that we need to completely, like, they're rebranded and whatever. And I said, well, I'll tell you what, I'm not going to put as much effort into it this time. And he goes, well,
what?
Like he was taken aback, and like I was like, I like, my passion's gone for this. Like, I put so much work in the other one, and like it was such a big letdown whenever like I put all this like heart and soul into something and then nothing came from it. And he looks at me, he goes, if that's the case, then I'll take over, but I would appreciate if you basically stepped up and, you know, did your best on something, just because, you know, he said pretty much that just because something happened in the past doesn't need to affect how your work goes forward in the future. Here's the thing. And I didn't think about it at the time, but like he goes, you got paid regardless. You know what I mean? Like you got what you know what I mean? Like your work was appreciated in the sense of you were compensated for it. So this idea that it was this ignorance that I had, and it was something that I didn't, you know, I knew it was ignorance in my head, but I didn't want to overlook that. And he helped me understand that sometimes it's just how things go, and you got to, you know, bite your tongue and just realize that, you know, things aren't going to work out all the time. But it doesn't mean you just stop and get lazy and just, you know, ignore your responsibilities and make a worse product just because, you know, you're petty about something.
Yeah,
you know?
It's I've had plenty of those times. We have it on a weekly basis where, you know, we shoot ads for clients, and somebody will come back with a snarky comment about, well, this looks terrible, or this and this, and you immediately are like, well, I'm just gonna kind of get this by whatever. But it's, you know, it's hard. Those are probably the most difficult times to remember to do things excellently. Is when you are facing somebody that's kind of being petty towards you. Trust me, I am the person, so you guys are aware, because I don't, you know, there's parts of me that I talk about on this podcast and there's parts that I don't. I am a troll. When I find somebody who's angry, or my first instinct is not to show them kindness. My first instinct is to continue to make them more angry. And I've had to overcome that a lot. And probably this year, honestly.
Sam, you know anything about that?
I'll make an example, and then I've got 2 verses that I want to read. But actually, let me get the 2 verses out of the way. So to kind of wrap this up, because I know we've only got a couple minutes left. Colossians 3, chapter 3, verse 23. Whatever you do, work with all your heart as working for the Lord, not human masters. Very, very simple verse, which goes along with this. And remember, you know, I talk about this. It's on a hoodie that I wear, and I got it specifically because of this. I look at worship as not a genre of music. Worship is a lifestyle that you live. And a lot of people either may look at me sideways when they hear that, or may just wonder what I mean. And some people do know what I mean. But worship is not just a genre of music that is the slower songs that you hear played in church. Worship is a lifestyle that you live every day. And basically what worship is, in the very, very simple way, without breaking this down too much, is making sure that whatever you're doing is uplifting to the Lord. Whether that means, you know, like I've told before, showing kindness to people in public, holding a door for somebody, you know, letting somebody go in front of you at Starbucks, little things like that. Whether it's, you know, making sure that when you speak to somebody that you're speaking encouraging words, not negativity. In times that you have to be truthful and honest, you're being truthful and honest, but in a loving way. It's making sure that what you're doing is uplifting to God, which is what worship is. And to my mind, I'm very, very passionate about that word, because I feel like it's very misused. And that's the very simple breakdown. There's a lot of ways that can go, and that could be a whole nother podcast by itself. But whatever you do, work at it with all your heart as working for the Lord, not human masters. So remember, especially when it comes to work, whether you're your own boss, whether you have a boss, whether you're like me and you have 7 bosses. I report to 7 different people at any given time in the company. You know, do your work as if it was God that's your boss. You know, that's the biggest way I can explain it, and the easiest way I can explain it. The last verse is 1 Corinthians 10:31. So whether you eat or drink or whatever you do, do it all for the glory of God. And these 2 verses are extremely similar, said in slightly different ways, but the same thing applies. Even as weird as it sounds, even when you're eating lunch, make sure that you're glorifying God. I'm not sure what that looks like. I wish I could give you a way that looks and how it looks, but I don't have a way, unless Ezra and Sam can come up with one. Here's my thing, and I'll wrap it up with this. This all spawned years ago, and Sam, I'm gonna ask you to do something. So pull up YouTube and look up with everything for the song of the day. Also, the hardest part about doing a podcast as the producer of the podcast is looking at everything, making sure that it's all good, and while you're live on mic, making sure you're not saying that. Yeah, that's the one. So copy that link. And then we'll post that as a song of the day. So song of the day is, as somebody who's been a musician in church for a very long time, I get asked what my favorite worship song of all time is. You know, it's like a very cliche question that I get asked. And you pasted it twice, Sam. This is what I mean about being a producer. I'm watching.
Just host the show. We got it. And all right.
But it's the song called With Everything. And it was, the reason it became my favorite song was it fully described not only how I played, who are Mike's 7 bosses: David Villa, Diana Villa, David Blaisdell, Walter Hayes, Josh Fontaine, Jamie Blaisdell, and Krista. That's only work bosses. Don't bring Lara into this equation. She's the ultimate boss. Let's not go there. Anyway, but With Everything fully described not only how I played, but how I kind of did everything, which basically is, the main crux of the song is we will give everything to worship you. And that was what I've always kind of latched onto. There was no music fade in, which is also my producer side coming out of me. But we're at 9:00. Ez and Sam, do you guys have anything you want to say before we wrap this up?
I've said a lot today. Sam, you got anything?
No.
Good job, Sam.
Poor Sam.
Well, thank you guys for listening to this rambling dude. I will see you guys on Monday. David will be back on Monday morning. I'm not sure if we're going to pick up where we left off with the names of God. This was kind of an impromptu podcast today, but thank you guys for tuning in and listening. We will be back on Monday. Hope you guys have a wonderful, wonderful weekend. I'm waiting on Ezra to know that he's ready. And on that note,
We out.